So why don't we just start with each of you introducing yourself real quickly, your name, how long you've had migraine, and what your worst symptom is. And Ben, you're at the top of my screen, so let's start with you.
Hi, my name's Ben. I've had migraine about as long as I have been aware of. I had it, probably starting around 4 or 5. I started, occasional ER visits with migraine when I was pretty young as well. So, very familiar with it, unfortunately. Worst symptom, usually neck stiffness, um, smell sensitivity, and aura, as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ben. And Erin, you're next up.
Hi, I'm Aaron, and I can remember having migraine as far back as 7 years old. Um, I would say the debilitating head pain is probably my number one symptom, followed by nausea. Um, if the nausea and the head pain get together, then it's lights out for days. So those are my top two.
Sounds great. Thanks for sharing that. And Jose, last but not least.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Jose Argueta. My migraine length started about 3 years ago, so I guess I'm the most fortunate one. And my worst symptom, I get hemiplegic migraine, so it just completely takes me out. It feels like you're having a stroke, feels like you're dying, but you're not. But that's my worst migraine symptom.
For those people who don't know me, my name is Shoshana, and I'm the executive director of Migraine Meanderings. And you probably found out about this event on Migraine Meanderings. Again, if you want to ask questions, please do. There's a Q&A section. There's also a chat section, and we will definitely try to get to your questions. Why don't we start with you, Aaron? First of all, how does migraine impact your life?
Whew, in a lot of ways. I basically have to babysit my triggers so that I don't trigger any symptoms, which is nearly impossible, with the world we live in. I've got to be careful of my environment, food that I eat, drink, entertainment, driving, school events with the kids. It just it's I have to learn to live alongside of it so that I understand, I guess, my margins. Uh, yeah,
Oh, that's a lot.
yeah.
Why don't we? And I know you got more to say about that, so we're definitely going to be coming back to that. What about you, Jose? If you were to like pick one or two key ways that migraines impacted your life, what would you say they are?
Yeah, so the two ways that it impacted my life was one, getting on medication. I like to do everything kind of natural, right? Believe in supplementation as far as vitamins, working out, etc. So it definitely affected me with going to the gym, which was a big part of my life. So now it's if I'm not mentally there, I can't just like be like, all right, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. No, it just I can't. It just literally just takes me out. Another way it's impacted my life is with my kids, hanging out with my kids, doing the normal things. It was like, going to like the circus or like the fair or even going to the movie theaters. Like if it's too much noise, like a migraine starts kicking in, and then I just like I have to leave the area for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes until it just settles down, and then I can go back into whatever I needed to get done.
Right. Wow, that's a lot. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What about you, Ben? How's migraine impacted your life? What are the main ways?
I feel like the biggest impact is usually the relationships that I have with people and forming relationships with people. I mean, my ability to spend time with my partner and really be present with them when I'm in pain, is difficult. It's a lot. It really takes a lot of the joy out of things. It saps a lot of energy. It takes a lot of focus. I work, I run a coffee shop, so I interact with people constantly, my employees or clientele. It's difficult to do a lot of that work to really be present in the space to support my team when they need supporting, to be there for our guests and be hospitable when they need hospitality, when I'm having trouble focusing and really like being the best version of myself.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. That can be really hard. What about you, Erin or Jose at work? How has this impacted you specifically in that area?
Well, I used to be a telecommunications technician. I climbed telephone poles for 20 years, ladders, telephone poles, crawl spaces, attics, and with the vertigo and the migraine attacks, I can't climb. I can barely get up a step ladder at home without feeling like the whole world is spinning. And so, I went from doing that 60 hours a week to having to find a different career path. And, that's been uh, about 10 years now since I left that career. And, still kind of navigating my way through a different one right now. I do a lot of different things. I wear a lot of different hats right now. But that was one of the biggest things is, workplace. I couldn't do the work that I had spent the majority of my life, learning how to do and then doing in a career that I thought was going to take me through retirement.
Right.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. And for those people who don't know, Aaron has the dubious positive of being the first man who has ever been involved with our organization and was willing to go live on a video. And then once Aaron did that, Aaron, I'm just gonna say you've impacted a lot of lives because we have a lot more men who are now involved and people who are wanting to participate in advocacy and other things. So kudos to you. It's a great example of you taking something that's really bad and kind of potentially destroyed your life and turning it around for good to impact other people. And so, really, really grateful about that. And the same for you, Ben and Jose as well. Being willing to be involved in our Men with Migraine project is such a huge thing and speak out. Now, for you, Jose, in terms of work, you have hemiplegic migraine. So for those people who watch this who aren't aware, hemiplegic migraine can mimic the symptoms of a stroke. It's not a stroke, but it can look like it. So it's not like you can just keep pushing through. So what has that meant for you in your career, in your workplace?
Yeah, so I work in the maritime industry, so I work on ships, lots of different ships, and I have to climb ladders, kind of like what Aaron has to do, and navigate the seas, et cetera, et cetera. And it definitely made work very difficult at times, especially with a hemiplegic migraine. It was in June. I'll make a very long story short. It was hot outside, as it usually gets around that time of the year, and I felt one coming on. I get the numbness, I get weakness, I get like my speech starts slurring up. And I usually get like this numbness from just the left side of my body, from literally like my eye, my lips, my gums, shoulder, arms. It goes all the way down. I lose sensation, and I just feel like completely off balance. And so, I'd go to the ER and they're just like, hey, listen, everything looks normal. Your vitals all check out. And so it just sucks because it's just like, all right, what's going on with me? And after a lot of research and talking to numerous doctors, we finally found out that it was a hemiplegic migraine. I don't get them often, but when they hit, it's debilitating. There's nothing I can do, and I literally have to be out the whole day. It takes about like 2 days to fully recover. So, and being in the maritime industry, it's Monday through Monday, 12-hour days. So I just kind of just have like the other guys just kind of work. The good thing is I'm a supervisor, so I just have like the other guys just work around what I need to get done. I'm like, hey, you do this, do this. I'll see you guys in a bit, and then I just go in late because that's the only thing I can do.
Right. That makes total sense. And thank you for sharing that. I can see you kind of been nodding. You're a manager in your job. What's it like when that hits you at work? Are you able to work around it, or is it something or does it really depend on the attack?
Depends on the attack, depends on the day. Depends, I tend to do most of my like on the floor work with my team on weekends when we're busiest. So I mean, if one hits on the weekend, it's pretty bad. It pretty much takes me out. I usually have to step away, and I mean, one body off the floor in those environments on a busy weekend environment is it's rough. It's rough on the team. I definitely don't want to let them down in those situations. Thankfully, they're pretty understanding if I have a good team, and right now I do. But that hasn't always been the case in the past. Slower days, sometimes it's easier for me to, seclude myself, but they with my migraines, they don't go away very quickly. Even with treatment, even if I take away all possible triggers in the environment, I'm usually stuck with them for at least an hour or two, and I can't really afford to, shut the door, turn off the lights, and do nothing for that long without
Right.
honestly getting in trouble with my bosses at that point.
Right. No, that makes total sense. And I know you shared in one of the focus groups we did about another career that you thought of getting into, but really can't. So that's like the culinary arts, I believe. Right. Do you want to just tell us real quick, what the issue is with you, trying to go that direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's something food is something I'm passionate about. It's part of the reason I work at a coffee shop, a specialty coffee shop. I really enjoy getting to create things that people enjoy. And it's something I've always done as a hobby since I was a kid, probably around the same time I started getting migraines. And it's a demanding job to go and like get into the culinary arts to work a line. Those can be like 90-hour work weeks. It's great work. It's very cool. It's something I care a lot about, but physically, I know it's just not something I could keep up with. I mean, it's difficult enough for me to keep up with just working the job I do now. So I know that the physical toll on my body, working a line or doing something like Jose does, like working on a ship and going up and down ladders and moving things like that, it's just not something I think physically I would be able to sustain for a long period of time.
Right. That makes total sense. Why don't we pivot slightly, guys, and let's talk about some of the challenges in actually treating migraine. And I want to start with like your experience with doctors. I know for a couple of you, some of your experiences, Jose, I don't remember what your experiences are with doctors, but have any of you had a challenge in trying to deal with a doctor and communicate, you've got migraine and trying to get help? Has that been a positive experience, or has that been a challenging experience for you? And feel free just to jump in.
Yeah, well, I'll go ahead and start off. So with me in the beginning, telling my doctor everything that was going on, he kept saying, it's your thyroid, you got to be on levothyroxine, etc. So I started taking levothyroxine, right, thinking that everything's gonna go back to normal. Nothing did. I would still get the numbness on the left side, still get the vertigo, of course, the migraines and everything else. And I finally started just going to different doctors. And speaking to several neurologists, and of course doing a lot of research on my own, until I could finally find some answers. And then with medication, like they try to put me on different things, and I was like, listen, I'm trying to be like as natural as possible. I don't want to be taking 15, 20 medications at one time. I want to take as minimal as possible because it all does have a long-term effect, and I want to minimize that as possible. So I'm just taking one for right now, which seems to work. But with the doctors, it was they just said it's most likely your thyroid, and you'll be fine. But that wasn't the case.
Right. Obviously, yeah, that's interesting that they would just say that it's just your thyroid rather
Uh,
than digging deeper. What about you, Aaron? What's been your experience with doctors?
Oh gosh, it's been a long journey of trying to find somebody that would listen to me. My personal family doctor wouldn't listen to me. It is, oh yeah, you're dehydrated, you've got headaches. Take an aspirin, whatever. Finally, he referred me to a neurologist who was very dismissive and, oh, you've got a headache today? No, no, I have a migraine. I'm in a migraine attack. You get all the symptoms. Sometimes you get the aphasia, sometimes you can't speak. Sometimes you get the vertigo. If you get hit with all this stuff, then you're just walking, I don't know, a walking implosion, like just ready to crash out everywhere. But just trying to communicate what you're going through to the doctor and then having them dismiss it or not even listening to what you've got to say and just labeling it something else. It's been a long journey of finding somebody. I'm finally with a headache specialist who was just a general neurologist when I started with him, but he is now a headache specialist, which is great for me. And but I still, if I have to go to the ER, then I have that same kind of issue where the doctor wants to know are you drunk? Like, what's what did you take? Are you on something? No, I'm in a migraine attack. I need, they want to throw all kinds of medication at it, but they don't want to listen to it. So I personally try to avoid the ER at all costs, just because a lot of times they make it worse because they don't listen to what you are actually going through. They just want to
Right.
slap something on it and move you out.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about the ERs, and obviously I want to get back to doctors as well. Ben, I know that you have not had great experiences with doctors, certainly as a young adult. Could you share a little bit about that? And also what your approach is to the emergency room? Has that been a positive experience or a negative one for you?
So I'm still in the process, I think, of trying to find a good situation uh for my migraines. Like I still don't have a set neurologist. I've been through a couple. I've switched PCPs periodically as well. Um, my experience with both primary care doctors and neurologists has usually been a lot of scapegoating, I guess, for lack of better terms, is them finding other reasons for the migraines triggering, other than me just having migraines. I back when I was 16, 17, I smoked. I don't anymore, but when it was that time, they would blame it on the nicotine. It would get blamed on alcohol sometimes when I was, around college. Caffeine intake, weight, sleep patterns, different things that I have improved over time. I've had better at some times and worse at other times. The constant through all of them has been migraine. I had migraine when I was, 170 pounds. I have it now 235 pounds. I had migraine when I had smoked. I have migraine now when I don't smoke. If anything, it's worse. So I think my experience with doctors, and I think I got it a little bit more when I was younger than I am now, is they just don't take it seriously. They would seek out any possible lifestyle habit that could be triggering a headache as far as they were concerned, and they would cling to that. And sometimes I would humor them, but it felt more often like I was doing it to prove a point, and that just didn't really feel constructive. Like it wasn't a solution to my migraine. I wasn't fighting them on it. I didn't know how to fight doctors on it. That's a scary thing to do because they're a medical professional. You're supposed to be able to trust them. Um, so, it was kind of intimidating. It's a skill I've had to learn as I've gone on. And as for the ER, generally, I just try to avoid it. I mean,
Right.
sometimes the medications in the ER work, sometimes they don't fully remove something. You never know what doctor you're getting in the ER. It's like spinning a wheel. So,
Yeah.
not a big fan of the ER. I don't do well with morphine personally, and sometimes they don't love that. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because there are actually guidelines that they should be following in the ER, but most ERs do not follow the recommended guidelines for treating migraine. I see you had a couple of comments saying no questions yet. Just want to remind people who are watching this, if you have a question, please put that in the chat and we will get to it. I see one person saying they've been on disability for the past year. They want to get back to work, but it was just too bad. Another person who's an accountant said he had to go on disability and retire at age 53, which is 13 years ago. Just not an unfamiliar story, unfortunately, and some other comments there as well. So I appreciate people chatting, and feel free to put comments about the other questions that we're asking as well. I wanted to get onto stigma because a lot of what we've talked about so far is very similar between men and women, right? We know that migraine tends to present itself pretty much the same between men and women. Although when Dr. Burke was on a few weeks ago and did a webinar on this topic, he says that we think that maybe men tend to get more vestibular symptoms than women, but nothing kind of really hard and fast. But where we know that things kind of differentiate a little bit is talking about stigma. So there's the stigma that you experience from other people and from situations, and then there's also self-stigma as well. And we actually released a video of Ben today on social media talking about that self-stigma a little bit. So I kind of wanted to get into that. Jose, why don't we start with you, first of all? Have you ever experienced external stigma? And let's do it external first, and then we can talk about internal stigma.
Yeah, so absolutely. When I first started getting them, I just thought it was a headache, and I would tell my coach, like, "Man, I'm getting a headache." They're like, "What's wrong with you, man? Go take some Advil and get back to work." It's blue collar, so it's a very different atmosphere. And so you would take the Advil, do absolutely nothing, or it might work for about 30 minutes, if that, and then you're just your head's pounding, and you've got all the symptoms. Especially in the blue collar field, they're really, everyone kind of pushes you to keep going, to keep working. And you're trying to push through, but your mind is just telling you there is no way we're gonna go through this. Like it's impossible. So it sucks because you want to get the job done, you want to work with your guys, you want to accomplish a common goal, but you just mentally cannot. And unfortunately, that mental act takes over with the physical as well. So you just can't do the job at hand. And that was kind of like the issue. So a lot of times I would just kind of keep it to myself. And if I felt like really off, I'd be like, "Hey guys, I'm gonna go use a restroom," and then I'd be gone for like 30 minutes, and I'd just be like, everything's blacked out, and I'm just like praying. I'm like, "God, just make this go away for like just till the end of the day, or like for the next hour, so I can get this work done." But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stigma for sure.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That just sounds so tough. Have you ever had the term, you need to tough up, you need to man it out, or man up and tough it out? Is that something you've kind of heard from people in the blue collar career that you're in, or is
Oh,
it's just more general, as in push through?
No, it's 1000%. I mean, I can't speak for the other fields, but I can speak for mine. 100%. It's just that go attitude, that go, go, go. So everyone will tell you to just push through. It's gonna be all right. Like if like you could break your arm and they'll just be like, hey, listen, just put a band-aid on and just keep going, you know. And unfortunately, it's that type of talk and
Right.
lingo, but we all know that's not the case. You can't just push through.
Right, absolutely. And we know that migraine's not just a headache, but so many people think that it is still. And so they don't understand why you can't just keep on going. What about you, Aaron? What's been your experience with external stigma?
Oh gosh, a lot of the stuff that Jose is talking about that resonates with me because, I've done labor work since I was 12, and sometimes when I was a field tech, I don't want to drop the company name, but when I was doing telecommunications, a lot of it was you were working on your own. So you had to push through, and you'd call your manager or call somebody to get a hand, and like you can't do that. You can't climb up 12 feet. Like what's wrong with you? You man up, do the job. And it's funny. Jose was talking about you got a broken bone. I worked with a broken thumb for 4 months and a fractured wrist as well during the same time frame, and I manned up. I pushed through it because you got to get the job done. But migraine, I can deal with a broken bone, apparently, but with migraine, you get all those symptoms that compound on top of each other, and your body's just like short circuiting, and you just you pass out. I've
Yeah.
had those experiences before. I there's one that's very vivid where we were in a Monday morning meeting, and I felt the whole world it was spinning. I was getting the cold sweats, everything was happening. And I went into the bathroom, and I remember waking up about 40 minutes later, somebody pounded on the stall door, and they ended up sending me home, and I was thrown up all the way home because it was taking me out, and um, just the idea of not being able to do that, we're taught, especially as men, you know, I guess society just expects that of you to man up and push through because that's what we do historically, right? So, when you throw migraine into the mix, it throws a whole monkey wrench into it, and everything is short circuiting. You can't man up, you can't push through it because your body won't allow you. It's not just a broken bone or sprained ankle or a cold or whatever. It's an entire body short circuit. It's fighting against itself and trying to purge things that aren't actually there. So it's very difficult to man up, as you will.
Yeah, that's tough. What about you, Ben? And the phrase manning up and external stigma, is that something that you felt from other people, or have you felt it more from yourself?
Both for sure. I mean, I've worked in the food industry for a while, and while it's not as intense as some other like blue collar jobs, it is a lot of go, go, go. The amount of responsibility put on one person is can be kind of intense depending on what you're doing and where you're working. And I mean, even before management, when I spent all my time on the floor, I couldn't just slide off because I was having a migraine. I usually had to push through it. Um, and the kind of managers I had, it was like flipping a coin. I wasn't sure whether or not I would get empathy from them if I communicated that to a point where I would often lie about what was debilitating me and what I would come up with something that sounded more legitimate
Right.
as
Like you want to
opposed.
give an example of that? Like instead of saying you've got a
I
migraine, what are you
I
telling
tell
them?
them I just went into the restroom and threw up,
Right.
or I was having trouble breathing. Like I've used some pretty intense excuses over the years, because I've had a migraine so bad that I can only like barely see out of my left eye because the pain is so intense. And those excuses work, but I've definitely had moments with managers where I have told them I have a migraine and they're just push through the rest of the shift. You'll be fine. I'm grateful now that I'm in a management position where I am able to step away a little bit more and get a little bit more empathy. But those for the majority of my time in the food service field, for the majority of my time as a barista, my experience has been a lot of like just push through, just
Right.
make it work, deal with it afterwards, take a leave, take an Advil, take a Tylenol. It's always something like that, which, they do absolutely nothing. Um, And then in terms of internal stigma, since you asked as well, I think there's a lot of that too, as when it comes to work, like I don't want to let my team down. I want to make sure that any work they're doing, I'm doing. They work hard. They're great folks. I'm glad I get to work with them, and I hate being laid up sometimes when I'm not able to be there to support them. It just doesn't feel fair. I don't like to ask them to do anything I'm not willing to do. So, and migraine really gets in the way of that. Outside of work, a lot of it, is involved with my partner. They also get migraines, and they have some other physical and mental disabilities going on that really impact their life. And, when we're both struggling, say, with a migraine attack at the same time, what do you do? And I think internally, I often feel like I am not doing my job as a supportive partner and as a man to take care of them because that's sort of my instinct is I want to make sure they feel taken care of. I want to make sure they get the medication they need, that they're fed and they've drank enough water, but it can be hard to do that sometimes when I myself am like fighting for my life, just trying to like keep my eyes open without being in debilitating pain. So I think that often bugs me more than the external stigma. I've kind of learned to brush off a lot of the external stigma, but the internal can be rough.
Right. That's interesting. And that's kind of what came across from the video that we released today. If folks haven't seen that video, I definitely encourage you to go onto our social media channels. And on TikTok is the one where it's getting the most views as well. And you talked a little bit about feeling that you were failing because you weren't able to manage the pain. Like somehow because you're a man, that pain should be manageable by you. But migraine is supposed to be literally one of the most disabling neurological conditions. And there's a lot of them out there. So for that to be described that way, it's interesting that still there's this sense of failure when you can't manage the pain or you can't manage the other symptoms as well. Why don't we go back to you, Erin, talk a bit about, the self-stigma. Is that something that you struggle with? Do you like tell yourself you have to man up? And I see we've had some comments here that people experience that, not so much from other people, but they definitely experience it for themselves, that they feel like they need to be there for people.
Yeah, I've been seeing some of those comments pop up. Yeah, I still I'm an overachiever. I'm a perfectionist. I've got a lot of I don't know. I put a lot of pressure on myself to push through life and get things done. And I'm learning through I guess through therapy to try to not put so many expectations on myself because I'm only one person and but it's some of that is mind over matter. It's a willpower thing. It's stepping back from the situation and uh, looking at the things that must be done compared to what I can put off. And they say tomorrow never comes and it's always today, get it done. But as somebody that lives with migraine, you have to know your limitations and you have to listen to your body, because what you can put off to tomorrow, if it doesn't take away from uh I don't know who's heard of the spoon theory, but if it doesn't take one of your spoons away, for today, and you can put it off to tomorrow, you might be okay to do it tomorrow. You might still have the same amount of energy you've got today, but if you try to load up and get it all done, today, you might lose the next 3 days because you didn't listen to your body and you tried to push yourself through that. So I've gotten better over the years in accepting that I don't have to do it all, but I still fall back into some of that, self-stigma and bad habits of trying to cram everything all in and, get it off the checklist. So balancing that, balancing good mental health, balancing my goals, trying to spread those out helps me feel better because I've got ADD and I like checking things off the list. So if I can check off a box tomorrow,
It's good.
that's okay, as long as it gets done, but I don't want to check it off next week because I tried to do it today.
No, that's very interesting that you're saying that. And I think it's a challenge, especially for people who have chronic migraine or people who have very, very severe migraine attacks, because we know migraine's on a spectrum. So one person can have a migraine and literally be able to push through. Another person could literally just be a blob on the floor. It's like it's just completely taken them over.
I've been
And
both.
so, yeah,
I've been
right.
both.
And I think most of us have who've had migraine for a long time. But it's interesting because that definitely adds to the self stigma and the external stigma. What about you, Jose? Do you find that like the phrase we used in our focus groups earlier this year was like societal expectations around masculinity? Does that impact how you yourself deal with your migraine? Is that a added pressure to you or not really?
I would say yeah, in a sense. I think as men, right, we always try to be the providers for our families, for our wives, for our kids. So I can only speak for myself, right? I can't speak for everyone, but I think in general, I think as men, we always are a little bit harder on ourselves. We have to hold on to emotions a lot more. It's now gotten to the time where we're really focusing on mental health and we're talking more as men. But I think for the longest time, it's just been, just keep it to yourself, just plow through it and you'll be fine. So it's man, it's just been difficult. It's just been difficult with certain things. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And there's so much that goes into migraine, it impacts so much of our lives that the impact it has in every single area can just be overwhelming. And it's such a shame that there is such a lack of understanding of what migraine is like, not only in men but in women as well. But because there's that lack of understanding, it affects us, our work, our relationships, the people we live with. If you have kids, your kids, definitely doctors, because we know that not every medical school has any training at all on any headache disorder, which always just blows my mind. And there are even neurology residencies that do not have education on headache disorders, which is just really hard to comprehend how that could actually happen. But it does. And so when you go out and you see a neurologist, you may be seeing a doctor who literally knows nothing more than you at all. And that's even if you're not that educated on it. But that's kind of scary. You're thinking you're putting your life in their hands, and they may not know anything about this disease that affects 40 million people in the US and 10 million men. The other thing we hear a lot is, oh, this is a woman's disease, right? No, and we know there are some diseases that are women's diseases. How do you, I'm going to jump over to you, Ben. I know this wasn't on my question list, but when you hear it described as a women's disease, or do you even hear that as that? How does that impact you? Or is that something you're constantly kind of pushing back on if people say you have migraine, but you're a guy?
It's not something I hear a ton. Thankfully, I definitely believe that it's said. And I feel like oftentimes, like my experience as a man is it's been harder to justify a disease like migraine or something mental health related, like depression or anxiety, because they're not visible. It's not something tangible. There's often not like some kind of visible aid that's required for a lot of folks. And I think because it's sort of this invisible thing, it's difficult to, you know, justify the impact it has. And I think, as a man, I feel like I get a little bit less empathy for invisible things like that, for mental health struggles. And like Jose mentioned, men's mental health is something that's been discussed a lot more in the recent past, which is great because mental health is important for everybody. And it's really awesome to see that that's becoming a part of everyday conversation. But that's a very recent thing. That's a very recent change. So, um, I think historically there has been, a lot more empathy between women for things like that, for things like mental health. I think that's just more normalized historically. I think you said like there's 40 million people in the US who have migraine, 10 million of them are men. And I think something we've talked about before is that the number might actually be higher for men. It's just a matter of recognizing that it's migraine, getting a diagnosis, or even admitting that you are in that amount of pain if you feel okay with admitting that you're in that amount of pain. And then, going forward with it, I think for a lot of men, it's difficult.
Right, absolutely. And we kind of touched on that a little bit in the webinar with Dr. Burke, who's also, by the way, my headache specialist and fabulous. Personally, I think one of the reasons he's fabulous is he gets migraine too. So you know how to explain how devastating it is and the impact that it has on your life. But I asked him, is it are men with migraine really underreported, like more so than women? And he was like, absolutely, men are far less reported. So we know there are at least 10 million men, but what we don't know is really how many there are. And I know from my own relatives, once you leave home as a guy, you're less likely to go to a doctor and to continue in treatment. And so you're just off the records altogether, which is really concerning. And we see in our support groups, women are more willing to speak up than men. They're more willing to share like their mental health issues, like you said, Ben, than women are. But it's starting to change, and that's why I'm so thrilled to have you three guys here today, just being willing to be open and sharing. Yeah, you're a guy and you have migraine, and yes, it impacts your life, sometimes very, very severely. And so as more and more people speak out, I know that it's going to start impacting more and more men as well. And hopefully we can start, making a difference in that. I did have one last question I wanted to ask everybody about advice, but before I go on to, what advice you would give to another man, is there anything else that we've touched on or that we haven't touched on that you think that it's important to say? And just kind of jump in if you do, or we'll just go on to the next question.
I'd like to interject something here. So Jose kind of touched on it, and Ben did too with the mental health thing. I think that's probably been one of the most successful parts of my migraine journey is my mental health, the attention that I've been paying to it and being intentional about seeking mental health, because you know stress is definitely a trigger. It's not, if you de-stress your life or your migraine's going to go away, because it's not. But stress can definitely build up in the body. Your blood pressure is going to go up. We all know, Jose talked about going to the gym and stuff. I miss going to the gym and working out more intensely because I can't do that anymore because your threshold is lower. And so I think there's a huge, like Ben was saying, there's a huge movement of mental health out there, and I think that's just amazing that we're talking about that. But that's one of the biggest things that I've personally been able to benefit from and apply in my migraine journey, is seeking mental health and finding somebody that clicks with. It's just like going to your neurologist. You need to find somebody that's going to work for you and listen to you on a mental health side too. So
Sure.
that's
Absolutely. No, that makes total sense. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. I think that it's just the fact that you are all here willing to speak is huge. For those who are watching, we actually were supposed to have a fourth guy as well, but surprise, surprise, he had a really bad migraine today, and just the medication didn't work. And it's just kind of, that's what this disease does. It's unpredictable. You never know how severe an attack is necessarily going to be. You may not even necessarily know whether your medication is going to work either. And so it really does impact every part of your life. And we all have different triggers as well. So in fact, before we go on to the advice, just real quick, if I can start with you, Jose, what would you say are your main triggers for migraine?
So my main triggers. So that's interesting because I'm still new to my migraines and how they really kick off. So I've been kind of experimenting on what would trigger me and what doesn't. So any type of arguments, like when I'll talk to like my child's mother, that will definitely kick off a migraine for sure. So I jokingly say every weekend when I go visit my kids, I always have to take a migraine pill because I just know it's going to kick off. It's not always the case, you know what I mean? But I just rather be safe than sorry. So there's that. Another migraine trigger. So arguments with just anybody will be a trigger. And then just kind of like another migraine trigger would be like finances. So just making sure that all my finances are in order, right? Is this paid off? Do I have money for this? Do I have money to take this trip over here and do X, Y, and Z? So money is definitely another trigger. So I always try to make sure that all my money's, squared away. But, expenses that come out of nowhere sometimes just kick in. So when you think your money's all set and then out of nowhere, this $1,500 bill for the AC unit blowing up, and you're like, oh man, I had money set aside for this. Now I got to use it for this thing. That's going to change everything. And then you're changing your whole life around. So money was one of my triggers I found out as well. So arguments, triggers, I'm sorry, arguments, money, finances,
Right.
And probably like food. So trying to figure out what kind of food. I figured like if I used to love chocolate. I'm a big chocolate guy. And now it's like I can have like one Reese's cup like every 3 days and I'll be fine. But if I go above that, a migraine will start kicking off. So I try to work with it.
Right, that's interesting. And just before I'm going to go to you, Ben, next on the triggers, but just for those people listening as well, the triggers are really complex. First of all, they stack. So the more triggers you're exposed to, the more likely it is to trigger a really, really bad attack. The other thing about triggers is that sometimes people, they think they have a trigger when it's actually prodrome, which is the first of the phases of a migraine attack. So for example, it doesn't sound like that's the situation with you, Jose, but I'm going to use chocolate as an example. As I'm a chocoholic, I absolutely love chocolate. So some people will find that they're craving food. They'll eat that food and then they get the pain or they're thrown up from the migraine. And so they're thinking, because I ate that food, therefore that is a trigger to me. But actually that could be part of the prodrome. The attack has actually already started. You're just not throwing up yet. You don't have the pain or anything else that you have, the stroke-like symptoms. And so some people who have stopped eating a lot of things actually do not need to stop eating those things because they may be in program. So just to kind of make it more complex, and we're all different. So what triggers one person may actually help someone else. Essential oils will be one of those things. Essential oil is a huge trigger, any sense of trigger for me. But some people, when they get a migraine attack, actually use essential oils to kind of calm that down. We're all so different and migraine is so complex. So let's go to you, Ben, real quickly. Do you know what your major triggers are?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about food and things we enjoy, I love sour stuff, acidic stuff. And in the last few years, especially, I can't have much of it without a migraine starting. It's like, I don't know if it's, the tension in my jaw that brings on a migraine because of that, but I just can't enjoy them like I used to, candy or otherwise, citrus, stuff like that. It triggers a migraine very quickly. Stress of all sorts, financial arguments. If I, don't have even temperament and I feel, the blood rush to my head, my adrenaline spikes, instant migraine. And thankfully, like Aaron, I've done a lot of work on my mental health to try and be as level-headed as possible, and that's helped a lot to trigger migraines through that. But you can definitely feel it coming on, which isn't great. And then I'm also extremely smell sensitive, and I do have trouble identifying which smells trigger it and which ones don't. The only consistent thing I have found is that it's weird to say cheap smells, cheap colognes, cheap perfumes, cheap body sprays, instant trigger. If I'm walking down the street, like over in Venice or something, and I walk past somebody who's wearing Old Spice, instantly, I have no choice, and it's just an instant migraine. But a nice cologne or perfume doesn't do that to me. So I never really know exactly what smell is gonna get it, but some of them do. I got to be careful in malls. If my partner wants
Yep.
to paint my nails, I have to leave the room. Yeah, that's a big one as well. So smell is the one that brings it on the quickest.
Yeah. Interesting you say that, just kind of off topic a little bit. I was sitting in a migraine conference, I think 7 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and everybody there had migraine. Every single person was a patient advocate for migraine. And this woman says, someone in here has cinnamon tea. And that's it. She could smell cinnamon tea, and somebody did. She says, that's a trigger for me. You got to take it out of the room. So that was like a new one for me, but that explains like how sensitive you could be. A lot of people with migraine feel like they've got the nose of a bloodhound. They can smell stuff that no one else can smell. Sometimes people will say that they know that it's going to rain or that the barometric pressure is going to drop because they get a migraine. It's just that they know those things. So what about you, Aaron? What would be your top triggers?
Oh gosh. Well, smell like a lot of us certain smells. Spearmint is one of my top. Like if somebody is chewing a spearmint gum, or if I'm walking down the grocery aisle, if I'm anywhere near spearmint, it's I have to hold my breath as soon as I get that first hint of it, because I guess ingest probably isn't the right word, but I inhale. If I inhale too much of it, it's lights out. I've got
Yeah.
maybe 15 minutes. I got to get back to my car. Um, Ben, you talked about colognes, alcohol, like the cheap ones. I think it's the alcohol content because the isopropyl alcohol, I can't be around it. I've got a beard. I use straight razor and stuff, so I'll clean that, sometimes. And so I have to hold my breath, spray the thing, and walk away. Um,
Right.
So, that's one of them. But yeah, certain smells, cigarette smoke, I can smell it. If you're a smoker, I can smell it on you. There's certain things that are you're hyper aware of because you're
Right.
hypersensitive to that, like the cinnamon tea. Which so and then foods, there's certain foods that I can't eat. The newest one is ground beef. I can't do ground beef. I can go through the drive-through and get junk food ground beef, but I can't do ground beef from a butcher. I can't do beef tacos, that kind of stuff. Um, they're just, yeah, food triggers is probably one of my that was one of the biggest I don't know, Rubik's cube of and I still haven't solved it, but I have a pretty good idea of what I can and can't be around or can't eat. Um,
Right.
Cilantro is a new one. I just found that one out over the
Yep.
summer.
Heard of
Weirdest
that
thing.
one.
So I
Yeah.
can't eat certain salsas. It's weird. I'm like, I love Mexican food. I love salsa, but
Yeah.
yeah,
That's really
it's an
frustrating.
ever-changing condition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned cigarette smoke because I was about to make a comment on it, but then we have a comment in the chat that some people, when they have a migraine, especially at the beginning, like when you're going through the aura phase, aura doesn't necessarily just mean you're flashing lights. It can also be phantom smells. And I'm not one of these people, but I do know people who smell cigarette smoke where there is no cigarette smoke, and they smell other things. So there you go, Aaron. So you're pointing
Yep,
to
I
yourself, and
do.
that's
Yeah.
just interesting that's also part of migraine. It is such a complex disease. And sometimes I always joke that migraine is kind of like it has AI built into it because it's like the minute you figured it out, it just goes and changes on you. And that could be, figure out the triggers, all of a sudden they change. Figuring out a medication or a device that works, it goes and changes. And that's real. That's not just in our heads. It's actually something that does happen with migraine. So I know that we're kind of getting very short on time. So I'm going to go around the three of you quickly, starting with you, Jose, and then Ben, and then Aaron. What is the best advice that you could give to another man who has a migraine?
Talk about it. Talk about it. Let me know what's going on, whether it's with me or with someone you can fight in, but talk about it. Don't be scared to talk about it. Whatever the symptoms are, whatever you're going through in life, whatever stresses you're going through, talk about it with somebody, whether it be, your local church, your friend, your mom, whoever it is, but talk to somebody. That'd be the best advice I can give to anybody is talk to somebody.
Yeah, I love that. It's very empowering to discover you're not the only person out
Mm.
there with it and to reach out to other people. Yeah, thank you for that, Jose. Ben, what about you?
Not waiting to deal with it. Talking to a medical professional as soon as you can. Migraine's a progressive thing. It can get worse. It changes. It goes through different phases. Getting treatment as soon as you can is the move. It's really not something you want to let sit. There's no reason to suffer silently. Um, it doesn't need to be a pride thing. It doesn't need to be like, I don't have the time. Making the time will improve your quality of life so much. It will improve your quality of life down the road. It'll help prevent it getting worse. The quicker you get those systems in place, the quicker you find a solid PCP or a neurologist to talk to, the quicker that you can get a good line of like mental health services, a good therapist to talk to, a good psychiatrist. Um, just the longer you wait, the worse it gets. So act fast.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. We talked about this in this project in the focus groups, and we actually did a project earlier this year specifically about migraine being a progressive disease that most people still are not being told by their doctors. It's starting to be talked about. It basically says every migraine you get begets more migraines. So the more attacks you get, the more you're going to get. And so pushing through may or may not be feasible on the short term, but in the long term, it's bad news to do that. We actually need to get appropriate treatment. So I really appreciate you picking that up, Ben, because it's so important. And what about you, Aaron?
Well, Jose and Ben kind of touched on the important things, it's talking about it. And don't wait. I made some notes because I knew there's a lot of things that I would like to say. But I think being okay with it, understand that it's okay, to not have control of everything and be okay living alongside migraine, but don't let it dictate your life. Don't let it steal your dreams. Don't let it steal your hope, because in almost 2026, we've come such a long way in developing, medical devices, medications. There's so many different treatment options out there that there's no reason to not try something and to have a better quality of life, because you're going to look back and wish that you would have. And if you do it now, you've got the rest of your life to look forward to as a better quality of life than just locking yourself up in a dark room and hoping it goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. Thank you so much. And thank you, the three of you, just for speaking out. I really appreciate it. If anybody's listening to this right now or listens to it in the future, because it's being recorded, and you want to get involved in patient advocacy, or you want to share your story, or you want to participate in a focus group and still stay anonymous, which is definitely feasible, please let us know. We're always looking for more people, men and women, to get involved and to start kind of changing the way that society views this disease. The more of us who speak out, the more it's going to change. And Erin, it was so true. When I was a child, there was nothing, literally just pain medication. That was all you could take. Now our problem is there are treatments out there. How do we get a hold of them? But there are a lot of options out there. Please go to our website, migrainemeanderings.com. If we have a subpage, men with migraine as well, which you can go and look at if you're a guy or someone who's a man with migraine. Please educate yourself and never ever think that you're the only person who's going through this or that it's your fault. We talked about stress and how stress can trigger attacks. Migraine is a neurological disease and it has triggers, but it's not caused by your stress. In fact, I would say migraine is probably one of the most stressful diseases you can live with because of the impact it has. So I just encourage people to connect with a doctor if you're not already, to talk to other people as well about living with this. And yeah, together we can make a difference. So thank you so much, Ben, Erin, and Jose for being with us today. Really appreciate you being willing to speak out and look forward to doing more projects with you in the future. Thank you so much and goodbye.